A Korean mafia boss handed a homeless single mother his unlimited credit card and walked away. Less than 43 minutes later, a transaction notification appeared on his phone. It wasn't designer clothes. It wasn't a luxury hotel. It wasn't jewelry or champagne. It was something that made his hands tighten on the steering wheel of his Range Rover until his tattooed knuckles turned white. In that moment he realized there would be consequences, because what she purchased would unravel everything he'd built his life believing. But there was another consequence he didn't anticipate. That single transaction pinged across his entire criminal network, marking her as a target. Street informants noticed. Gang rivals took screenshots. Her ex-husband got an alert. She wasn't just being tested anymore. She was being hunted. 36-year-old Young Tae-sung had stopped believing in human decency the night he found his father bleeding out on a warehouse floor. As the invisible hand controlling LA's Korean organized crime network, from cryptocurrency laundering through K-Town restaurants to luxury car theft rings that moved vehicles from Beverly Hills to Seoul, he'd built an empire worth tens of millions on a foundation of fear and exploitation. His Brentwood estate sat behind gates and cameras, a fortress of marble and glass where Versace furniture filled rooms no one visited. He owned a Porsche 911 Turbo S, an Audi R8 and a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. His Audemars Piguet Royal Oak watch cost more than most families earned in 5 years. Yet every night he stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles, feeling like a king ruling over a kingdom of lies. His late father Young Dae-ho had taught him one brutal lesson before dying in his arms. The poor are parasites, son. We helped Sun Hee escape her addiction, gave her money, gave her hope. And she repaid us by telling our enemies exactly where to find me. Desperation plus opportunity always equals betrayal. Trust no one who has nothing to lose. They'll destroy you the moment they have the chance. Welcome to the channel, beautiful souls. The stories about second chances, dangerous love, and the power of choosing kindness over cruelty captivate you. Hit that subscribe button right now. Your support means everything, and trust me, this story is just getting started. Now let's see what happens when a homeless mother's choices shatter everything a mafia boss believes. Tae-sung had carried that gospel like a blood oath for 15 years. He'd proven it true 1,000 times over, building a network of homeless informants, addicts, and desperate people whom he paid to spy on each other. He watched them sell out their own mothers for a few $100s. He used their poverty as a weapon, their hunger as leverage, their desperation as proof that his father was right. The poor were dangerous and mercy was a luxury that got you killed. Then on a freezing February night outside a closed Whole Foods in downtown everything changed. He saw Sarah Clifford tucking threadbare Walmart blankets around her 8-year-old daughter in a shopping cart, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. When he approached with a crisp $100 bill, more out of cynical curiosity than kindness, she looked him straight in the eye and said something no one in his world had ever said. I don't take charity from strangers. I don't know what you want in return and I can't afford to find out. For the first time in 15 years, Young Tae-sung encountered someone with nothing who still had the audacity to refuse him. Fascinated him. It insulted him. It made him reckless enough to pull out his Black American Express card. Unlimited, no spending cap, and whisper a challenge that would destroy everything he thought he knew. 24 hours. Take it. Prove you're different from every other desperate person I've ever met. Prove my father wrong about people like you. What he didn't know as he walked away. In his world, showing interest in anyone was the same as painting a target on their back. And what neither of them knew, the real test wasn't whether Sarah would betray him for money. The real test was whether Tae-sung could survive discovering that everything he'd built his empire on was a lie, and whether either of them would live long enough to matter. The man zip-tied to the chair in the Long Beach warehouse was crying, which meant nothing to Young Tae-sung. They all cried eventually. Blood dripped from the man's split lip onto the concrete floor, each drop echoing in the cavernous space that smelled of rust and fear. Please, the man sobbed, his designer polo shirt, probably stolen, soaked with sweat. I'll give you names. My mother, she knows people I'll tell you everything, just please. Tae-sung's tattooed hand didn't waver as he held up his phone, showing the bank transfer records. $73,000, siphoned from one of his cryptocurrency accounts over 6 months. You stole from me, David. You thought I wouldn't notice. I'll pay it back. My mother has savings, I'll make her. There was the moment Taesung waited for. The moment that proved his father right every single time. Desperation didn't bring out nobility in people. It revealed what they'd always been. Animals willing to sacrifice anyone to survive. Your mother, Taesung said softly, lowering the phone. Behind him, his lieutenant Ji-hoon shifted, knowing what came next. You'd sell out your own mother to save yourself. The man's silence was confirmation enough. Taesung nodded once. Ji-hoon moved forward. Within 10 minutes, the lesson was delivered, the money would be recovered, and David would spend the next month remembering that stealing from young Taesung carried a price he couldn't afford. In the Range Rover afterward, Taesung stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror and saw his father's eyes staring back. Not the kind eyes from childhood, but the dying eyes from that night 15 years ago, when he was just a boy kneeling in his father's blood on a warehouse floor, not so different from tonight's. Son, his father had whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. The homeless woman, we helped her, gave her everything. She told them where to find me. For drug money. I was wrong to trust her, son. Never trust the desperate. They'll destroy you. For pocket change. Ji-hoon's voice pulled him back to the present. Boss, we need to talk about the Yakuza. They're moving product through our territory again. This is the 3rd time this month. But Taesung wasn't listening. His mind was elsewhere, trapped between memory and the spreadsheet on his phone showing his network of informants. 43 names. Homeless people, addicts, sex workers. All desperate, all paid weekly to report on street activity, to spy on each other, to confirm his worldview daily. He'd built an empire on their betrayals, proven his father's dying words true 1,000 times over. The light turned green. He drove through downtown LA. Past tent cities under the 110 overpass, past the closed Whole Foods where security lights illuminated the parking lot like a stage. That's when he saw her. A woman tucking blankets, thin, worn things that looked like they came from Target's clearance bin, around a small child asleep in a shopping cart. The store lights caught her face and Taesung saw something that made him pull over. Dignity. Exhausted, desperate dignity. He approached with $100 bill. Already knowing how this would play out. He'd take it, maybe cry, definitely grovel. They always did. I don't need your money, she said instead, her voice quiet but steel-edged. I see men like you every day. Rich men who think money buys anything. Her eyes met his, unflinching. It doesn't buy me. For 15 years, no one had refused young Taesung's money. The shock of it made him reckless. He pulled out his black American Express card, the one with no limit, and held it between them like a dare. 24 hours, he heard himself say. Prove you're different. Her hands shook as she took it, but she didn't look away. Different from what? From everyone else who's ever had nothing. Across the parking lot, hidden behind a dumpster, Carlos zoomed in with his iPhone camera. The black card glinted under the streetlight. He smiled as he captured the shot, already calculating what this information was worth. The Korean's getting soft, he thought. And soft men make fatal mistakes. Sarah Clifford didn't see the camera. She only saw the dangerous man walking away from her, and the small plastic card in her hand that felt like a trap she'd just stepped into with her daughter's life as collateral. Lily's forehead burned like a furnace against Sarah's neck as they stumbled into the 24-hour CVS on Vermont Avenue. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the air conditioning too cold after weeks of sleeping outside. Sarah's hands shook as she grabbed children's Tylenol from the shelf, then approached the pharmacy counter where a tired technician looked at her with barely concealed judgment. I need amoxicillin, Sarah said, showing the crumpled prescription from 3 months ago when they still had Medi-Cal. My daughter has a fever. Please. The black American Express card felt radioactive as she handed it over. $67.43. The transaction went through. Sarah half expected alarms. Police, something to confirm this was all a nightmare. Instead, the receipt printed normally and she walked out with a white paper bag that felt like salvation and damnation combined. Outside, her fingers fumbled with the business card Taesung had given her. She called, breathless. I bought medicine for my daughter. I'll return the card now. His voice came through low and dangerous. You have 23 hours left. Use them. The line went dead. Sarah stood in the CVS parking lot, Lily whimpering in her arms, and felt the weight of impossible choices crushing her chest. Every survival instinct screamed this was a trap. Rich men didn't give unlimited credit to homeless women without expecting something terrible in return. But Lily needed so much more than medicine. She needed winter clothes. A real bed. The dental work Sarah couldn't afford after Marcus broke her tooth. The shelter on Hope Street had turned them away last week because it was full. The job interview at Target's corporate office, the one that could have changed everything, missed because Sarah had nothing clean to wear. 23 hours. What could 23 hours buy if she was brave enough, or desperate enough, to use them? Across the street, hidden behind a Prius, Raymond watched through his phone's camera. He'd recognized Sarah immediately. You didn't survive the streets without memorizing faces. And you definitely remembered when someone was holding Young Taesung's black card, the one with no limit, the one only his inner circle ever touched. Raymond's hands shook from more than just withdrawal. He owed Carlos $18,000 from a poker game that went sideways. The debt was crushing him, and Carlos's patience had a reputation for running out violently. This information, this woman, this card, this connection to Taesung, could buy Raymond time. Maybe even freedom. He took photos. Sarah getting into a battered Toyota. The black card visible in her hand. License plate. Everything Carlos would need. Sarah drove to the Motel 6 on Sunset. $89 for one night that felt like luxury after weeks of parking lots and doorways. She gave Lily the medicine, tucked her daughter into clean sheets, threadbare but clean, and finally allowed herself to shower. Under the scalding water, Sarah cried. For the job she'd lost. For the life Marcus had destroyed. For the dignity she'd thought was gone forever until a dangerous man with tattooed hands had given her a chance to prove something she didn't understand yet. She didn't see Raymond in the parking lot, phone camera pressed against the window's edge. She didn't see him send the photos to Carlos with a message. The Korean's new girl. Has his black card. Could be useful. Carlos smiled at his phone in his downtown loft, surrounded by stolen electronics and ambition. He'd been looking for leverage against Young Taesung for 6 months. This homeless woman with Taesung's card was exactly the weakness he needed. He forwarded the photos to a number in San Diego, Marcus Clifford, with a simple message. Your ex-wife is sleeping with money. Thought you'd want to know. 300 miles away, Marcus Clifford stared at the photo of Sarah holding their daughter, holding a black American Express card that represented everything he'd tried to take from her. Rage and greed twisted his features into something monstrous. He began packing for Los Angeles. In the motel room, Sarah held Lily close, believing for one dangerous moment that maybe, just maybe, they'd be safe. She had no idea that her choice to accept Taesung's challenge had just painted targets on both their backs, or that 3 different predators were now circling, smelling blood in the water. The 24-hour test had become a hunt. And Sarah didn't even know she was prey. The fluorescent lights of Target felt like heaven after weeks of darkness. Sarah pushed the red shopping cart through aisles that smelled of new clothes and possibility, Lily's small hand gripping hers tightly. The Columbia winter coat, powder blue with fleece lining, $78, made her daughter's eyes go wide. "Mommy, it's so warm," Lily whispered, burying her face in the puffy fabric. Sarah's hands trembled as she added Nike sneakers to the cart, the black card heavy in her pocket like a loaded gun. $65. A week's worth of Old Navy leggings and Gap t-shirts. Underwear. Socks. Things her daughter needed, things that kept Sarah awake at night worrying. Every beep of the scanner felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. "I know that card, honey." The voice came from behind, sultry and sharp. Sarah turned to find a woman in her 30s, heavy makeup barely concealing exhaustion, Gucci knockoff purse slung over her shoulder. "Man who owns it doesn't give nothing for free. What's he making you do?" Sarah's confusion must have shown because the woman, Jasmine, her name tag from the casino job said, laughed without humor. "You really don't know, do you? That's Young Taesung's card. Korean Mafia. He's testing you, sweetheart. Collecting you." The words hit Sarah like ice water. She looked down at Lily, then back at Jasmine's calculating eyes. Something shifted in her, not fear but recognition. This woman was another version of her, just further down whatever road Sarah was walking. "Come with me," Sarah said quietly. At the Target Starbucks, she bought Jasmine a turkey sandwich and coffee. $23 that felt more important than the coat. What would you do with 24 hours and unlimited money? Jasmine's laugh was bitter. "Run. Men like him collect people. You're just the latest. She leaned closer, her perfume clashing with the coffee smell. Words already on the streets. You're marked now. Outside, Sarah held Lily close, the shopping bags cutting into her arms. That's when the Range Rover pulled up and Taesung emerged, his Audemars Piguet catching the morning sun. His dark eyes swept over the Target bags, something unreadable crossing his face. Why aren't you buying yourself anything? The question sounded almost wounded. Because I'm not the one who needs saving, Sarah said, meeting his gaze. 4-3 heartbeats, they just stared. A mafia boss and a homeless mother, both seeing something that shouldn't exist in their separate worlds. Taesung felt his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. Protectiveness. Dangerous, reckless protectiveness. His phone shattered the moment. Jihoon's voice was urgent. The streets are talking. Carlos knows. He's asking questions. 300 miles away, Marcus Clifford stared at the photos on his phone. His ex-wife, his daughter, and a black American Express card. The Greyhound bus to LA rumbled beneath him as rage and greed twisted his features into something feral. That night, someone pounded on Sarah's motel room door. She opened it to find Raymond, strung out and desperate, his eyes wild. "People are coming for you," he gasped. "I can help, but I need money to disappear first." Raymond's desperate eyes tracked the cash Sarah withdrew from the Bank of America ATM. 5 crisp $100 bills that felt like betrayal in her hands. "Take it and disappear," she whispered, glancing back at the motel room where Lily slept. "Don't tell anyone where we are." Raymond stared at the money like it might bite him. "You're just giving this to me? You warn me. That's worth something." Sarah pressed the bills into his shaking hands. "Go." He ran, disappearing into the LA night. What Sarah didn't see. Carlos's men in a black Escalade across the street, cameras tracking Raymond's every move, now locked onto her location like a missile finding its target. Taesung's phone buzzed with the ATM alert. $500. Cash withdrawal. His call cut through Sarah's darkness like a blade. "Who did you give my money to?" "Someone who needed help," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Someone who warned us we're in danger. You showed mercy to a man who would have sold you out for a hit." His voice was tight, something between fury and fear threading through it. "That's not survival. That's suicide in my world." "Maybe your world is the problem." The silence stretched between them, electric and dangerous. Taesung ended the call but couldn't stop his hands from trembling on the steering wheel. In the Long Beach warehouse, Raymond confessed everything through tears. Carlos, the photos, the street network buzzing with speculation. Taesung should have killed him. The old version of himself would have. Instead, he pulled out his phone and transferred $12,000 to Raymond's gambling creditor. "You're free," Taesung said, watching shock bloom across Raymond's face. "The woman you photographed just bought your life. Remember that." Later, alone in his Porsche, the notification made his world tilt. $3,800 to home at last, a homeless family shelter. The memo line read, "In memory of all the mothers still waiting." Taesung had to pull over on Sunset Boulevard, his tattooed hands shaking against the leather steering wheel. "She has nothing. She's giving to others who have nothing." His father's dying words echoed, "The poor are parasites." But Sarah Clifford was proving that gospel a lie, transaction by transaction. Carlos's men kicked in the motel room door at midnight, guns drawn. Checked out an hour earlier. On the nightstand, a note for housekeeping with a crisp $100 bill. "Thank you for your kindness." Carlos's voice crackled through the phone, rage making it venomous. "Find her. Now." 300 miles away, Marcus Clifford's Greyhound pulled into Union Station. He stepped into the Los Angeles night with nothing but a duffel bag, his ex-wife's photo, and the certain knowledge that his daughter was worth more than Sarah ever gave him credit for. In a different motel across town, Sarah held Lily close, the black card burning in her pocket, unaware that 3 different predators were now hunting her through the neon wilderness of LA. Are you still with me? If Sarah and Taesung's story is pulling at your heart, drop a comment below and let me know. Are you Team Sarah's mercy or worried about the danger closing in? Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because the streets are watching, enemies are circling, and everything is about to explode. Sarah's hands shook as she dialed the number Taesung had scrawled on the Target receipt. I don't know who's after me or why, but someone broke into my room. Lily's scared. I need help. 20 minutes later, the Range Rover pulled up, and Taesung emerged like a dark angel in Tom Ford black. Lily fell asleep between them on the drive to Brentwood, her small body finally relaxed. Sarah's hand accidentally brushed his on the gear shift. The contact sent electricity through both of them. Neither pulled away. The estate took Sarah's breath. Marble floors, Versace furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking LA's glittering sprawl. But it felt empty, like a museum of a life nobody actually lived. This way, Taesung said quietly, leading them to a guest suite larger than any apartment Sarah had ever rented. Lily barely stirred as Sarah tucked her into sheets that probably cost more than a month's rent. When Sarah emerged, Taesung was waiting in the hallway, something vulnerable in his dark eyes. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. "I'm trying to understand something." His tattooed fingers clenched and unclenched. "You were supposed to prove my father right. That desperation makes monsters." Instead, he couldn't finish, but his eyes said everything. The air between them crackled with dangerous possibility. Later, in his restaurant-grade kitchen, they shared coffee from his Nespresso machine. Sarah told him about Marcus. The first slap that became a pattern, the escape with Lily in the middle of the night, the restraining order worth nothing when you have no address to protect. Taesung's jaw tightened with each word. Then he spoke, his voice raw. "I've spent 15 years using people's desperation against them. I pay people in poverty to inform on each other, making their lives harder to prove they're worthless. I became..." He stopped, shame crossing his features. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but not for herself. "You became the monster to prove monsters exist." She reached across the granite countertop, placing her hand over his. "But you're wrong. We're not all broken." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You can be different too." His hand turned over, threading his fingers through hers. They leaned closer, his expensive cologne mixing with her cheap Target soap, two worlds colliding in the space between. His phone exploded with sound. Jihoon's voice was urgent. "Marcus Clifford is in LA. He's been asking around K-Town about a woman with a kid. Boss, there's more. Carlos is offering Marcus a partnership. They're going to use Sarah to get to you." Across town, in a motel that smelled of mold and desperation, Marcus Clifford smiled at the photos Jasmine reluctantly provided. "She's at his estate. Brentwood." Carlos leaned forward, his gold Rolex catching the dim light. "Then we hit him where it hurts." Marcus's smile turned cruel. "My daughter's worth a fortune if he wants them this bad. Let's see how much." Morning light flooded the Brentwood estate like a promise Sarah didn't trust. Taesung stood in the doorway of the guest suite, dressed in a sharp Armani suit, his tattooed hand gripping his phone. "I have to meet with my organization. Critical business. But you're safe here. My security team is the best." The unease in his voice made Sarah's stomach tighten. Before leaving, he did something that stopped her breath. He showed her a Wells Fargo account in her name. $50,000. For after the 24 hours end. For rent, for a start. His dark eyes searched hers. "No strings." "I can't," Sarah started, but he cut her off. "You've already proven what I needed to know. This isn't charity. It's repayment for a debt I didn't know I owed." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. After he left, Sarah sat in his study with the black card, making her final purchases with shaking hands. A lawyer's retainer for permanent custody of Lily. $5,000 that felt like armor against Marcus. A scholarship application fee for a good school. $150 that tasted like hope. Interview clothes from Nordstrom. A blazer, slacks, sensible heels. $347 that represented a future where she wasn't invisible. She was building something. Finally, the security monitor caught her eye. A woman at the gate. Sarah's breath stopped. Jasmine, mascara streaked, looking terrified. "She says she's in danger." The security guard's voice crackled through the intercom. "Needs help." Sarah remembered the Target Starbucks, the $23 meal, the way Jasmine had tried to warn her. "Let her in," Sarah said, her kindness becoming the weapon that would destroy everything. Jasmine stumbled through the door, tears streaming down her face. "They're coming. Marcus and Carlos. They made me scout the security, made me learn the guard rotation." Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry. Your kindness, when you bought me that meal, I didn't want to do this, but they'll kill me if... The explosion of breaking glass cut her off. 4 men in black tactical gear poured through the windows. The security team fought back, but they were outmatched. Sarah grabbed Lily, running for the panic room, but Marcus was faster. His hand clamped around her throat, and suddenly she was back in their old apartment, smelling whiskey and rage. Hello, wife. His smile was poison. Looks like you traded up. Let's see how much your new boyfriend values you. He dragged them into the panic room, barricading the door with furniture. Lily's screams echoed off marble walls. Taesung's phone exploded with alerts. Estate breach. Security down. He abandoned the meeting, his Porsche screaming through LA traffic at 90 miles per hour, Ji-hoon and his men following in a convoy of black SUVs. When they arrived, it was chaos. Shattered glass, blood on his Versace furniture, his security team wounded but alive. Marcus's voice came through Taesung's phone, cruel and satisfied. $10 million in the next hour or I kill them both. Taesung, that woman you're testing? She told me everything. How you gave her the card to prove poor people are trash. How you were using her. She knows exactly what you are, and she hates you for it. The line went dead. Taesung's hands shook. Turn you. She knew it was all an experiment, all a test to confirm his cruelty. Even if he saved her, he'd already lost her trust. What he didn't know, Marcus was lying. Sarah had said nothing. But the poison was already working. 3 hours. The siege lasted 3 hours that felt like lifetimes. Taesung transferred the $10 million, watching the numbers drain from his Chase account. But Marcus didn't release them. Power was a drug he'd been deprived of too long. Me for them. Taesung's voice cut through the standoff like a blade. Let Sarah and Lily walk out. You can kill me if you want your revenge. Inside the panic room, Sarah's breath stopped. He was offering his life for hers. For theirs. Everything Marcus had said, about Taesung using her, testing her like a lab rat, suddenly felt like the lies they were. The exchange happened at the shattered front entrance. When Sarah walked past Taesung, their eyes met. She saw him bracing for her hatred, expecting her disgust. Instead she whispered, he told me about the test. About what you believed. But he also told me what I spent the money on. You watched me choose kindness over greed, strangers over myself. Her hand brushed his. If you were testing me, you failed because I passed. Those words ignited something in Taesung. When Marcus reached for him, Taesung moved. The fight was brutal, close quarters, his Krav Maga training against Marcus's street fighting desperation. Bone cracked. Blood sprayed across the imported Italian marble. Ji-hoon's team breached from 3 sides, neutralizing Carlos's men with military precision. Sarah didn't look away this time. She needed to see all of who he was. The violence, the darkness, the man shaped by 15 years of believing the worst in everyone. Later, after private doctors and cleanup crews transformed the war zone back into a sterile palace, Jasmine was brought before Taesung. She trembled knowing what came next. Execution. Disappearance. The price of betrayal. She was threatened. Sarah's voice stopped everything. She tried to help at the end. She warned me in time to hide Lily. She deserves a choice, not a death sentence. The old Taesung would have laughed. The new one, the one Sarah was creating, paid off Jasmine's $43,000 debt and wrote her a check for a job at one of his legitimate import businesses. The woman you betrayed is the reason you're breathing, he told her quietly. Remember that. But the victory was short-lived. Taesung's phone erupted with emergencies. 3 operations hit simultaneously. The Yakuza, smelling blood in the water, had coordinated attacks across his entire network. A cryptocurrency exchange, a luxury car storage facility in Vernon, a K-Town restaurant front. Ji-hoon was in critical condition, a bullet through his shoulder protecting a warehouse full of stolen Teslas and BMWs. Sarah found Taesung in his study, surrounded by security monitors showing chaos, his head in his tattooed hands. The Audemars Piguet on his wrist suddenly looked like a shackle instead of a trophy. She took his hand without asking. You can't go back to who you were. I won't let you. But you also can't abandon your people. So we find a third option. We. The word wrapped around his heart like armor and threat all at once. His phone rang. Minjun, his most trusted advisor since his father's death. The man who'd taught him the business, who'd held him when he cried over his father's body. Boss, we need to talk. I know you're changing. I've watched it happen. A pause heavy with grief. And I can't let you destroy what your father built. I'm sorry. The line went dead. The car bomb outside exploded 2 seconds later, shattering windows, filling the Brentwood night with fire and screaming metal. A Mercedes-Benz S-Class, Min-jun's signature car, reduced to twisted wreckage and flame. Taesung stared at the inferno, his entire worldview collapsing like the burning vehicle. The betrayal wasn't from the desperate poor his father had warned him about. It was from his own inner circle. From loyalty bought with money and fear. Everything he believed was a lie built on lies. Sarah gripped his hand tighter as sirens wailed in the distance, her daughter crying in the guest room upstairs. Tao what? The organization fractured down the middle like a bone snapping. Half followed Taesung. Half followed Minsu, who stood in a K-Town warehouse surrounded by loyalists, preaching the old gospel. Mercy is weakness, compassion is suicide, the poor are parasites who'll destroy you. LA's Korean district became a war zone. Drive-bys on Wilshire Boulevard. Firebombs through restaurant windows. Bodies in alleys behind the Galleria. But Taesung fought differently now, evacuating families before hitting locations, paying off Minsu's informants to warn civilians, showing restraint where he once showed brutality. Every choice cost him soldiers, territory, money. Every choice made him more human. Sarah watched him transform in the fire. This man who'd built an empire on cruelty learning to wield mercy like a weapon. In a Koreatown safe house between battles, plaster dust in their hair and sirens wailing outside, they finally stopped fighting gravity. The kiss was desperate, passionate, two broken people finding wholeness in each other's damage. I love you, Sarah whispered against his lips, tasting copper and hope. I love who you're becoming. But I also see who you were, and I need to know. Will you regret choosing us over your empire? Taesung's answer broke them both. I already regret the empire. I've spent 15 years hurting people to prove they deserve to be hurt. You showed me the truth. I became what I hated most. His tattooed hand cupped her face. If I lose everything else but keep you and Lily, I've finally won. Sarah pulled back, her eyes fierce. I wasn't just a random homeless woman. The confession tumbled out like a dam breaking. I was a forensic accountant at Deloitte. I discovered Marcus was laundering money for a crime syndicate, the same one allied with the Yakuza attacking you. When I threatened to report him, he destroyed my career, forged documents making me look incompetent, drained our accounts, forced me onto the streets. He kept me powerless with fear and poverty. Taesung's expression shifted to something dangerous. You have evidence? Everything. Bank records on an encrypted flash drive I kept hidden. Shell companies' transaction histories spanning 3 years. Enough to dismantle their entire network. Marcus, the Yakuza, all of it. She met his eyes. But using it means I testify. Permanent danger. Federal witness protection maybe. I'd be looking over my shoulder forever. Lily would grow up knowing her mother turned state's witness against organized crime. Then we don't, he started, protective instinct flaring. Do it. She interrupted, steel in her voice. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. Let's burn it all down together. The final confrontation came at a Port of LA warehouse, shipping containers stacked like steel coffins under harsh sodium lights. Minsu stood flanked by armed men, Raymond and Jasmine zip-tied to chairs beside him, both terrified. They were bait, proof that Taesung's mercy had made him weak. You've gone soft. Minsu sneered, his voice echoing off corrugated metal. His Rolex caught the harsh lighting. Your father would be ashamed. Prove you're still the man he raised. Kill these parasites and come back to reality. They're nothing. Addicts. Informants. The desperate trash your father warned you about. Taesung's Glock was trained on Raymond's head. Sarah stood behind him, barely breathing, Lily safe with FBI agents she'd contacted hours earlier. This was the moment. The old gospel or the new truth. 15 years of believing the desperate deserved their suffering, or 1 week of learning mercy was strength. The warehouse held its breath. Even the ocean wind stopped. Taesung lowered his gun. My father died believing a lie. I won't. He shot the chain holding Raymond and Jasmine instead. The warehouse erupted. Muzzle flashes like lightning. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with ocean salt. Ji-hoon appeared from the shadows, his shoulder still bandaged from the earlier attack. throwing himself between Taesung and Minsu's gun. The bullet that should have killed Taesung tore through Ji-hoon's chest instead. When the smoke cleared, Minsu lay dead, blood spreading across oil-stained concrete. But Ji-hoon was dying in Taesung's arms, the man who'd been his brother for 15 years gasping his last breaths. "You did good, boss," Ji-hoon whispered, blood on his lips, his hand gripping Taesung's. "She changed you, for the better. Your father would have been wrong, but proud anyway." Sarah knelt beside them both, her hand on Taesung's shoulder, as the man who'd taught him the business died, blessing his transformation. Outside, FBI agents swarmed the port. Sarah's evidence was already dismantling the syndicate. But victory tasted like ash and grief and the terrible price of becoming someone better. 6 months later, the Brentwood estate looked different. The Versace furniture was gone, replaced by comfortable IKEA pieces that actual people sat on. The marble halls that once echoed with emptiness now filled with voices. Raymond coordinating housing placements, Jasmine managing intake interviews, former gang members learning construction skills to build tiny homes for LA's homeless families. Taesung had systematically dismantled his criminal empire, brick by bloody brick. Sarah's forensic evidence and his own testimony to federal prosecutors had taken down the Yakuza network, Marcus's syndicate and Carlos's operation. The deal was unprecedented. No prison time in exchange for cooperation that would dismantle organized crime across 3 West Coast cities. His legitimate businesses, the restaurants, real estate holdings, import companies, became the foundation of the Second Chance Initiative. Sarah ran the Family Services division from an office that used to be his weapons room. She wore a Banana Republic blazer instead of Target clearance, but her eyes still held the fierce dignity that had stopped him cold outside that Whole Foods 6 months ago. They were engaged now, planning a small wedding at a community center in K-Town. Nothing fancy. Nothing that looked like his old life. Lily called him Appa the first time 3 weeks ago. Taesung had cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes. On a quiet Sunday, he drove his last remaining luxury car, the Range Rover, everything else sold to fund the initiative, to Forest Lawn Cemetery. His father's grave sat under a oak tree, the headstone simple, Young Dae-ho, beloved father. "You were wrong," Taesung said softly, kneeling in the grass. "Son, he didn't betray you because she was poor. She betrayed you because you never gave her a reason not to. You only gave her money, never dignity. Never trust. Never the chance to be more than her desperation." His tattooed fingers traced his father's name. "I almost made the same mistake. I built an empire on your dying words, and it nearly killed the only real thing I've ever had." He placed flowers, and a photo of Sarah, Lily, and himself at the beach, finally smiling like people who believed in tomorrow. "I found what you never did. Someone who proved that trust is the real test, not suspicion. Love isn't about protecting yourself from betrayal. It's about believing in someone enough that betrayal becomes impossible." The Black American Express card hung framed in their new home, a modest Pasadena house with a yard where Lily could play, with an inscription Sarah had chosen, 24 hours to prove humanity. A lifetime to honor it. But the life they'd built wasn't without shadows. Taesung still had enemies. Not everyone believed in redemption. There were those who wanted revenge for the empire he'd destroyed, the deals he'd made, the secrets he'd traded for freedom. At the initiative's annual charity gala at the Beverly Hilton, Taesung stood at the podium sharing Raymond's success story, 2 years sober housing coordinator engaged to Jasmine. The ballroom held 400 people, half of them former addicts, sex workers, and homeless families who'd found second chances. Sarah stood at the back, watching the man she loved speak about grace instead of violence, when a woman appeared beside her. Elegant, maybe 60, with cold eyes that had seen too much. Something about her face was familiar from old photographs Taesung had shown her. "I've watched him," the woman said quietly, her voice carrying a Korean accent. "Watched him build his hatred of people like me into an empire. You changed him. That's rare." Sarah's breath stopped. "Sun-hee. Tell him I'm sorry," Sun-hee continued, not looking at her. "Tell him his father was kind once, before addiction made me a monster, before I traded his location for enough heroin to kill myself slowly. Tell him I've been sober 8 years, but it doesn't erase what I did." She pressed a flash drive into Sarah's hand. "And tell him there's someone else coming. Someone from the old days who won't forgive what he's done. His testimony destroyed families. Not just criminal ones but the families of the men he helped put away. Redemption is beautiful. But it doesn't erase the past. She disappeared into the crowd before Sarah could respond. Sarah looked at the flash drive, then across the ballroom at Taesung. He was laughing with Lily, lifting their daughter now, onto his shoulders. The Audemars Piguet was gone, replaced by a simple Timex. The tattoos remained, but they meant something different now. Reminders of who he'd been, not who he was becoming. The drive felt like a bomb in her palm. Show him the warning and risk him falling back into the darkness of paranoia and violence? Or hide it and risk being blindsided by enemies neither of them saw coming? Across the room, Taesung's eyes found hers. He smiled, the real smile, the one he'd learned from her, and gestured for her to join them. Sarah slipped the flash drive into her purse and walked toward her family, knowing the past wasn't finished with them yet. Redemption was beautiful. But in their world it was never free. The choice of when to tell him and how much darkness to let back in would come tomorrow. Tonight she chose to believe in the life they'd built on the ruins of who they used to be. But in the parking garage, a figure watched them through tinted windows, a photograph of Young Dae-ho's grave on the dashboard, and a hatred 15 years cold finally finding its target. The past was patient. And it always collected its debts. And that's where we leave them, building something beautiful on the ruins of who they used to be, but with the past lurking in the shadows, waiting to collect its debts. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe because there's so much more coming. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. New York, Seoul, London. I want to know where my incredible audience is tuning in from.